all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. Good morning.
Good morning.
Anyone here for the first time? Now that I've got your hands in the air, what brings you here? Sorry, I always fall for it.
No, that's fine. Coming with my son, he comes here, so I wanted to see what he was experiencing.
Nice. He didn't tell you he was getting too much out of this, did he? I don't want the bar to be raised too high, you know.
No, it's hard to pry anything out of it.
Someone brought their mom one time, maybe 6 months ago, and she said to me before, I brought my mom today, so you better have your A game today. I said, well, I'll try. Who else for the first time? What brings you here? Yeah, there's a hand. I don't see anything other than a hand. Yeah, both of you. Either way. Go ahead.
I was going to another temple, which was more orthodox.
Yeah.
And I actually I've been here before to the Zen classes.
Yeah.
But I like it here, so that's why I thought I'd
Nice.
come and check it out.
Well, welcome. Good to see you.
A friend brought me.
A friend.
Yeah.
What did that friend tell you?
Want to go to meditation. It's been a while, but
Yeah. Right on. Well, glad you're here. I'll probably touch on it a little bit more after, but today is, especially if you look at the time in Asian countries right now, is Vesak Day, which is the celebration of the birth, the death, and the day of awakening for the Buddha. So it's a really kind of special time around the world for Buddhists. And so it's just kind of cool to sit here. It's about 2 a.m., say Taiwan time right now, so I don't know that they're celebrating Vesak Day too much yet, but it's just kind of a really special time of year that changes each year based on their calendar. But so it's cool to be able to sit here on Vesak Day with y'all. So since I know y'all came for Vesak Day, right? All right, so we'll start with the meditation. Couple things to tell you for those who may be here for the first time or sitting for the first time. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off, unfortunately. Don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is this working? Is this not working? Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds. People cough, phones ring, doors close. This is life. Life is filled with sounds. The practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos, not escaping from it. Don't expect anything, right? We expect things all day long. We judge things all day long. What we look like, what we wear, what we eat. We're constantly in these judgment modes. And this practice is learning to just abide in sensation of breath and work on going beyond judgment. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed, same thing if you're in the chairs or benches. Shoulders are relaxed, hands are on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. Eyes are open or closed, mouth open or closed. Please keep breathing. If you stop breathing, it's going to be difficult for the rest of us, so it helps to keep breathing. If you need to move, simply move. If your arm itches, scratch your arm. If your leg hurts, move your leg. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means you're alive. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. letting go of expectation, letting go of judgment, just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return to breath. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, There's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than anyone in this room who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for every one of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what you get every single day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. The day is young. Most of you won't even make it home before you're disturbed by someone. Hopefully you can get out of the space before you're disturbed by someone. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And that present moment might suck. But it's learning to be with things as they are. Most of us run from things our entire lives, trying to fix things, change things, control things, manipulate things, or people. And this practice is learning to sit and be with things, which is very difficult for most of us. To just be with the present moment as it is. To not want to change it. That is the hardest thing for so many people to do. And that's where the practice of meditation is so critical. What happens during meditation? Not much. Whatever problems are in the world are still there. Whatever problems are in your life are still there. All the people who aren't doing what you want them to do didn't automatically switch just because you sat still for 20 minutes. But the practice is learning to just be with things as they are. And once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, then life gets simpler. We work on our mind and our reaction to the world around us. This isn't about being Buddhist or Christian or Catholic or Muslim or Jewish or pagan or whatever it is. It's learning to be kind to yourself and every other person you encounter every moment of your life. That's what the Buddhist teachings are about. About being nice. About being kind. About being forgiving, understanding, compassionate. Pretty sure that's what most religious leaders taught. But if it takes you showing up to an intro to Buddhism class on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock to convince you that we should all be nice to each other, then rock on. So I mentioned briefly earlier, I'll say a few comments on it and then just kind of open up to questions. I touched on Vesak Day, which is a really beautiful time of year, especially for those who grew up Buddhist or grew up in and or around Buddhist cultures, Buddhist countries. And it's the celebration of the day the Buddha was born, about 2,500 years ago. The day the Buddha died, about 2,500 years ago, minus 80. And the day the Buddha was enlightened, when he was 35. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He began to understand why we suffer. All right? And so to me, when I think about celebrating the Buddha's birth, I think about celebrating the birth of us. We're alive. We have this incredible opportunity to live. And yet we often waste it. We waste it being angry, we waste it being sad, we waste it being depressed, we waste it being frustrated, we waste it being irritated. We waste it trying to control and fix. Once in a while, we find a tremendous amount of gratitude and appreciation for simply being alive. That might last for about 30 seconds, and then we go back to being pissed off. But hey, it was fun while it lasted. So when I think about the birth of the Buddha, it's, as most of you have heard me say, awakening is just understanding the bodhicitta, the Buddha nature, the awakening that's within all of us, and learning to be alive and appreciate this life. Filled with difficulties, filled with challenges, filled with wonderful things, filled with miserable things. That's life. It's always been that way, and it's always going to be that way. So since we have this precious life, appreciate it. Do good things with it. Help people. It's that simple. And then you look at the awakening of the Buddha and celebrating that. So here he is, 35 years old, and when I think about celebrating the awakening of the Buddha, I think about an individual who had everything. He was a prince, for those who didn't know. He had all the wealth, all the riches, anything you could imagine. Whatever he wanted, it was there for 29 years. Then he left it. And he realized that how could he live with a world of so much stuff when there's a world that suffers? So when I think about the Buddha's awakening, I really think about what it would be like to just wake up each day and live simply for the benefit of others. Most people wake up and simply live for the benefit of the self. It's actually our motto for our college group, for the benefit of others. We even have a hashtag, FTBOO. I don't know if I'm supposed to divulge that secret, but it's for the benefit of others. And to me, I think about the Buddha's awakening, and that was his entire life, at least after he turned 35. Right? And then I think about celebrating the death of the Buddha. And to me, this goes back to a book I read when I first started this practice 16 years ago, which is about what happens to great beings, great spiritual masters at their time of death. And the entire essence of the book wasn't even about death, it was about life. And so we think about this culture saying rest in peace or dying peacefully. So if we're going to celebrate the death of a great human, then to me it's about understanding that if that day is coming for all of us, which it is, we don't know when it happens. Could be this afternoon, could be tomorrow, could be 100 years from now. But at some point in time, we all check out. And if we know that's coming, why waste any moments angry and bitter and frustrated at all the things that didn't work out how you wanted them to? And it comes back to just having an appreciation. So we've done things over the years celebrating Vesak Day. We didn't do anything this year. We'll do it next year. But it's a beautiful time, celebrated all around the world. And like I said, it's kind of cool just to be sitting here and, sharing it. So as I always say, meditation is free, Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, and learning to be kind. So with that, I'll just kind of stop and open up to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice. As always, I'd much rather address things that are on your mind and go from there. Yeah.
Yes, 2 weeks ago when Reverend Bhante was here, and in the talk, it was my recollection, it was explained that compassion and wisdom go hand in hand.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, if I'm ignorant and I don't have wisdom, why cannot I have compassion? I don't see the connection between.
Yeah. So the question, if you didn't hear, was when Bhante was here, when we had the blessing a couple weeks ago, and great master from Sri Lanka, and he talked about wisdom and compassion going hand in hand. And if I understand your question, you're asking that if you don't have ultimate wisdom, right? You said if you're ignorant, I didn't want to,
Which I definitely do.
Right. Well, I appreciate you recognizing your ignorance. That's step one. Most of us just think we're full of wisdom. The question, if I understand it, is if you have the ignorance, you don't have ultimate wisdom, why can't you have compassion? And I'm not sure if I'm very clear on what you're saying, but my initial response is, and then correct me if I'm wrong, you can have compassion without wisdom. What Bhante is talking about, and really the core, one of the core teachings of Buddhism, is that to understand that Buddhism is about having both wisdom and compassion.
Okay.
It doesn't mean
that you cannot have compassion without the wisdom.
Correct. Except, right, I wanted to start there. We can do wonderful, kind, compassionate acts and be ignorant fools. The question is, if we are coming from a place of ignorance, it is that ignorant mind that is viewing and judging the thing we're doing as ultimate compassion. So what the teaching is around is that to fully understand compassion is to come from a place where that compassionate act is being driven and motivated, is probably a better word, inspired by, cultivated from wisdom. Because how do we know, if we don't cultivate wisdom, how do we know if what we're doing is actually compassionate? Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think it's, a lot of people bring up the phrase "fake it till you make it," right? Around this topic. I've heard this for years. And so we have a relative level of wisdom and understanding that we can often know when we're not being compassionate. And so we choose to be compassionate. But there's also been moments in our lives, I'm sure, where we've been compassionate in helping someone, but it was really driven around, but I hope I get what I want, right? Ultimate compassion isn't about getting what you want. The wisdom is, and that's the bodhisattva practice. Bodhisattva is an enlightened being, and the idea behind the bodhisattva is there's no gift, there's no giver, and there's no receiver. How often do we give things and we want something back? We give something and we're attached to that gift. The bodhisattva practice is no gift, no giver, no receiver. Right? I'll be kind to you as long as you're kind back. Just be kind. And when they're mean back to you, be even more kind. That's hard.
Very hard.
Very hard. Yeah. So you see, does that help clarify? Yeah. And last thing I'll say on that is if we sit around waiting for this like endless ultimate wisdom before we start trying to have compassion, we'll be waiting I don't know about you, waiting a long time. Right? So, yeah.
Does the snail story come in?
I almost told the snail story. Yeah. Thank you, Nancy, the biggest fan of the snail story. Yes. The snail story is the practice of ultimate wisdom and compassion. And now half of you are wondering, what's the snail story? Who here's never heard the snail story? Oh, that's enough. All right. Have you heard the snail story? No? Okay. I thought you heard it. That's why I didn't start with that. So the snail story is years ago when I was a kid, I used to step on a lot of snails, right? And the rains would come and snails would come out, and I used to step on them. I killed a lot of snails. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm like 10 years old, 5 years old, 15 years old, stepping on snails. And then I got into Buddhism, and I was at some talk someday at temple. And I don't even know what the talk was, but all of a sudden, like this thought in my mind triggered, and I was like, oh my God. You killed a lot of snails. And the talk was something around non-harming, right? And I started to think about all these snails that I harmed. And they weren't doing anything wrong. But I just thought I was better than they were and that they didn't matter, so I just would squish them. And then after I heard this talk, and this is 2003, 2004, around that time, I got on this crazy, like, save the snail kind of crusade. And so for like 2 years I ran around, and like every time it would rain I was like moving all the snails out of the way. I felt so bad for all these snails, and I was like telling people what to do with snails, and so I was nuts about saving all these snails. And that went on for like 2 years, and I'm patting myself on the back thinking I'm this great human being, this powerful person saving all these snails. And then 2 years later, I heard a talk probably around wisdom. I don't know what the talk was. And something like kind of hit me, and I was like, oh my God, Jeff, you're such an idiot. Here you are thinking you're saving all the snails, but how do you know you're saving them? So when a snail is going, right? We see them going at a certain point in time, and I made the assumption that I knew exactly where the snail was going. So I would pick up the snail and I would move it across to where I thought the snail was going. I have no idea where the snail is going. How do I know the snail wasn't actually about to turn around and go in the opposite direction, and now I've moved the snail further away from where they were intending to go, and in their effort to go back, they got stepped on. So my compassion trying to save the snail maybe led to their death. I would move snails off the sidewalk. Do all of you walk on sidewalks? Or do you once in a while walk on the grass? I put the snails in the grass thinking that I was moving them from, being in harm's way. Well, if they're on the sidewalk, at least you can have a choice if you see them or not. If they're in the grass, you don't see them at all. Nighttime, you don't see them, right? So I just kept messing with the snails, thinking I was being this endless, compassionate dude filled with ignorance. So then, now what do? I see the snails. I kind of either physically or mentally or emotionally join palms. I wish them well. I give them my Namo Amitofos, and I leave them alone. The snails are on their own journey, huh?
At least you don't step on.
I don't step on them, right? And that's, again, the Dalai Lama is one of his favorite, one of my favorite things he says, when he says, if you can't help people, at least don't harm them. So I made the decision that I don't know how to help the snails, but I'm not going to harm them. So I wish them on, I leave them alone. Right? Wisdom and compassion. If I knew everything about that snail and what was best for the snail, then I would know what to do with her or him. But I don't. So that's the snail story. Yeah.
Kind of going back to what you're talking to before about like the giving of the gift, but not wanting something back from it.
Yeah.
I told a buddy of mine I've been meditating for a while, and he was like, why are you doing that? I was like, well, I'm trying to, learn to have a peaceful mind and, not be selfish and, trying to be compassionate towards others. He's like, well, don't you think just meditating to be happier is a selfish goal?
Right.
And I was like, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I thought about the gift giving comment, like, I've tried to give gifts because I enjoy seeing other people feel good, but then a part of my brain was like, yeah, it feels good that they feel good, doesn't it?
Yes.
So it really is, I feel like it's completely almost impossible to do something that isn't ultimately for yourself.
Sort of. Yeah.
Because even you could let's take pain for some reason, like being like a martyr or whatever,
Yeah.
or whatever, but it could ultimately be wired back to somehow you. It's all
Yes.
for you anyway.
It is all for me. Yes. Everything you said, absolutely 100%. The Buddha talked about craving and desire being the cause of our suffering. And that because we put so much emphasis on self, right? We spend our entire lives trying to feed and crave everything for me.
Yeah.
And that's the cause of our struggles in life. And the Buddha said that there are healthy cravings. There are healthy desires. The desire to suffer less is healthy. The craving to have less cravings, as silly as that sounds, is a healthy craving. Without the desire to want to suffer less, none of us would be here.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we have to be very careful about getting caught in that game, because ultimately, if I practice wisdom and compassion to make myself a kinder, gentler, happier human being, that is going to benefit everybody. Does it make me happy to be happy towards others? Yes. Am I going to be mean to people just because I feel good if I'm happy to others? No. So I would tell your friend, thank you for your thoughts, and continue sitting. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again, it's baby steps that we are often very selfish people. And if we work on being less selfish, we feed the homeless every Thursday, 5:00. And lots of people in here do good things. I'm sure all of you at some point in your life have done good things. And when we do good things, we feel good. That doesn't mean you should stop doing it.
Right. I think though it's good to be able to look at I actually appreciate what you said, because it gives the other side of the coin where you actually get to look at it. Like the mind will still say that.
Yes.
So it makes you look at it a little more critically.
Yes.
And a little more analytically, saying, okay, that's okay, but it's really about the outcome.
Yes, because ultimately, so to take it not one step further, but to a different maybe angle, if you haven't explored it this way, think about when you help someone, right? You feel good, right?
Yeah.
Why is that feeling so different from how we always feel? Ultimately, the Bodhisattva practice is that I believe, and I'm not saying I'm there, I'm not, but that we will do things that help others. And that's just how we are. But because we wake up every moment thinking about me, And then we go help people and we feel good for an hour, and then it's back to me, me, me. Yet somehow we get lost in this, we help someone for an hour and we feel good. And then we spend the next 23 hours trying to help ourselves, we feel like crap. So we go help people for an hour and we feel good. I hope someday helping people, that rush of feeling good goes away, because that means that's just how we normally operate. Something to ponder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't ever really notice it when I'm in a group meditation, but something I noticed when I am home alone meditating, and for no particular reason at all, I can't figure it out, I find myself crying and not sobbing uncontrollably, not on any particular thought at all. I can't think of anything. It just comes. And I just keep meditating, but it's just, I can't figure out exactly what that's about.
Yeah. You don't think I'm gonna have an answer to that, do you? Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. Interestingly enough, I've heard that before. Sometimes I've heard it the way you explained it, and sometimes I've heard the opposite, what people say when they're sitting with groups. And there's one thing which may or may not correlate directly to this, because each person is stuck with their own, stuff when they sit. But when we sit and we're by ourselves, and there's no people around, and there's no TV, and we set our phones down for all of like 30 seconds, unless of course you're using an app to meditate. Nothing against that, but when we sit by ourselves, what are we stuck with? Ourselves. And when we very honestly and authentically and genuinely sit with our minds, man, that can be a scary thing, right? So if we've carried a lot of pain in our lives, which by this stage most of us have, and we sit quietly and we don't have any other surroundings, sometimes it brings us, and this is for everybody, not just you, it brings us back to like, wow, what am I sitting with? And when we sit with that pain, it can be very emotional. But it can also be very beautiful to just be with that, Yeah. Anyone else started just fully crying when they're sitting in meditation? There you go. Yeah. Yes.
So lately I've been struggling because we talked about the roots of suffering, ignorance, greed, all the other stuff. And then we live in this culture where that is our culture. It seems like.
Really?
And then sometimes I wish I'd never came awakened at all and never sat and just continued on in that ignorance. Just to sit and be grateful and keep an open heart and try and maintain that feeling, not just during meditation, but driving on the I-15 to work.
Yeah.
All of it. It's hard to keep all of that.
Yes.
So it's not going to change.
Mm-mm.
And I guess getting more space, not reacting or engaging with it
Yes.
is what this practice kind of helps me. Hope I can do that.
Definitely. Yeah, it's, it is, often there's kind of this expression where people don't begin to explore Buddhism or meditation really unless they're ready to kind of explore. Because if you don't want to recognize your levels of greed or anger, ignorance, then this path is not going to do you any good. You have to wake up to that. When you wake up to the fact that we do live every day with a lot of greed, a lot of anger, and a lot of ignorance, then if we have half a heart, that's not fun to live with. So we want to work through that. And that work is difficult. And especially, in most cultures, this one definitely, are built on, and that's, we took the name Dharma Bums. There's the quote from Kerouac, work, produce, consume, work, produce, consume. All the stuff we buy, we have it for a minute, we throw it away, and it ends up being junk on our curb. We showed Samsara, and I know a handful of you here were there last night watching the movie, but that film is incredible to just show the cycle of everything. The cycle of harm that we do to animals and to humans and to the environment, just to consume it, just to throw it away, just to repeat. That's not pleasant to wake up to. Neither is suffering. You know, Suzuki Roshi, great Japanese Zen master who built San Francisco Zen Center, he would say that when Buddhism takes root in a new culture, it's like holding a flower up against a rock and expecting that flower to take root. And he said it takes about 100 years, right? This is America. For the most part, everything that this country and this culture stands for, in many ways, is the exact opposite of what the Buddha was actually teaching. And I'm not scared by that. I'm not afraid of that. I welcome that. And I say, wow, what an incredible opportunity we have in a country that is driven by greed, founded on greed, to bring this teaching into this culture. I can run from it and say that's impossible, or I can say, wow, what an amazing opportunity every one of us in this room has to go out there and be nice to everyone all day and to not live your life today built on greed. What a blessing that is, you know? And at times frustrating. But that's where, to me, community is important because, you know, like you said, you're still showing up. So it's something that's resonating with you enough to say, I don't want to give up. I don't want to just default back into what I knew my whole life. So thanks for sharing. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
So I'm currently in school, I was taking that ethics and healthcare course. One of my colleagues was doing a report on comfort care at the end of life, and she was expressing what she found based on religions. She had mentioned that Buddhists, this is her words, Buddhists didn't believe that end of life for people should be comfortable because it's their karma to suffer. And I thought, I don't think you understand karma, but I didn't know how to explain it to her.
Yeah, correct. She didn't understand karma. There's a whole bunch of stuff in that question. A couple things for anyone who's new. Often, when people say Buddhists think, or those Buddhists, or what do Buddhists think, that very often is coming from a place of they heard one person who they think is Buddhist say one thing, and so they just jump to like, well, this is what all Buddhists believe. Even the questions of like, what do Buddhists believe about this or that? There was the Buddha who lived and died, and he taught for 45 years, and then there's what everybody for the last 2,500 years has been retelling and saying about what they think the Buddha said. Which interestingly enough, wasn't even written down until 100 years roughly after he died. Everything he said was memorized and recited for 100 years, and then they came together and they were like, man, this is some good stuff. We should probably write it down. So it's like the telephone game occurred for 100 years. That's why all these sutras, for the most part, they start out, thus have I heard at such and such time, at such and such place, with such and such people, the Buddha once said. It's all retelling. Now, I've always said, I don't care if Donald Duck said this stuff. If it's good stuff, then beautiful. Specifically to the, does that make sense so far? Specifically to the karma part and the death part.
Or even not just that, how do you explain karma to someone who hasn't done any sort of readings, but think that it's just what you deserve?
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. And I'm getting there. I was just still trying to work through the rest of the stuff. So I'll start with that. The word karma, for those who don't know, literally means action. Karma is the most misunderstood, I believe, misinterpreted word in this kind of English Western culture. Because we grew up thinking karma is getting what you deserve. And karma has nothing to do with what you deserve. Karma, coming back to the self thing, karma is actually not even about what you get. It's actually about what you give. Karma is action. The Buddha taught that we generate karma 3 ways. Body, speech, mind. What we think, what we say, and what we do. So our karma isn't about what we get, it's about what we give. Think of a pool table, right? You hit the cue ball into the rack. Every ball goes into a different direction every single time. Our entire life, we are that cue ball. Everything we encounter, every person, place, and thing, we have an impact on it. And if we practice compassion, loving kindness, chances are we might impact things in a positive way. You ever been nice to someone and they've come back and done mean, angry things to you? You ever been mean to someone and they did something nice to you? Right? Our karma is what we give. It's not what we get. Right? Karma is definitely not what we deserve. Karma is simply what happens. Now, I'll try to sum this up briefly, but the Buddha taught very clearly that if you are around the Buddhist teachings and you're a human, your karma is incredible. How many of you woke up today thinking your karma is incredible? Like, oh, my life sucks. You know, this didn't work for me. They didn't install this properly. This isn't hitting this deadline. My life is over. As we sit there with all our, clothes and houses and cars and food and, but my life sucks. Oh, poor me. My karma sucks. Your karma is incredible. Right? Your karma put you in this seat. Karma is amazing. I mean, think of all the lives that we have lived in this room for how many years we've all been alive and all the places and things that we've gone and the cultures we come from and the places we grew up in. What an incredible, magical experience it is that we're all even sitting here right now. Like, this is ridiculous that we're all here. That's our karma. Our karma put us in this room. And we would say in this moment, they're like, wow, maybe, unless you hate this, wow, this is pleasant. But now let's say we're all here and something tragic happens. That's still our karma because it put us here. And then someone does something tragically to this place. And our karma put us here. If we like this experience, we're okay with our karma. None of us are sitting here probably saying, I deserve to be here right now. But if something tragic happened right now, we would all say, we didn't deserve to have that happen. So we intellectually spin karma. And I'm really trying to explain this in a very different way than I normally do, because I think it's important. So at the time of death, does that make sense? The time of death, and I'll close with this thought. These are called tankas. There's an image, a tanka, of the Buddha at his time of death. And these are often, the Buddha or disciples of the Buddha or bodhisattvas, and they tell stories and different meanings. And there's one of the Buddha at his death, and a lot of people are sitting around crying. And then there's one disciple, and he's not like celebrating, right? But he's just kind of pleasantly got a little smile on his face because he understands that with birth comes death. Right? It's just a part of the whole cycle. Right? The Buddha said very clearly, we are guaranteed, once we are born, right? We are guaranteed to age, we are guaranteed to get sick, we are guaranteed to die. That is what we get. Our karma is what makes that happen. The simple answer to your friend, in case you can't retell everything I just said, is tell your friend karma is not what you get, it's what you give. Karma means action. It's what you give to the world. Yeah? So, on that, I'm going to close. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit from this practice be transferred to those who've recently lost lives in Sri Lanka and to the tragedies that have occurred there and to the families and friends who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace and free from suffering and free from worry. May we all be at peace and free from suffering and free from worry.